Welcome to Build Your Maverick Business, the podcast for underdog, outlier, and renegade entrepreneurs. Brought to you by Strange Creative Studio. If you dream of going off on your own and launching your rebel empire, but don't know where to start, you're in the right place. We'll teach you how to use mindset, branding, and practical advice to build a killer business and transform your world. And now, here's your host, founder of Strange, Alex Pitt.
Hello, welcome back. Now there is a lot of advantages to working the way that I do. And if you don't know what I mean by that, I mean playing it very fast and loose, going where the mood takes you, not really fucking planning anything. When it comes to the recording of this podcast, I tend to do it a little bit last minute. I tend to not always know what the fuck I'm going to talk about until the microphone is in front of me and we are recording. I play a lot of this by ear because that's how I work, and you know what? It's nice to go with the flow, rather than trying to force anything. I find it helps me show up authentically. I find the entire tone of this podcast in particular is a lot more conversational when I do it this way. The downside, however, is that you can never guarantee that the manager of your building is not going to bump into you a couple of hours before recording to say they're going to be hacking all the plaster off the walls directly above where you plan on recording said podcast. So I've had to go and have a chat with the lovely lads outside and say, when were you planning on shutting up for lunch? Because my organisational skills are non-existent and I've got a podcast to record. So God love them, they're having their lunch at the moment. There's a couple of meal deals on the go and I better get through this. So here we go. Now this week, I am feeling very nostalgic. The weather has properly changed. The clocks have gone back. It's dark. Every year when this happens, all I want to do is sit in my flat under a blanket with a glass of red wine, watch old TV shows. I'm already excited for Christmas. I'm already wondering if it's too soon to crack out a bit of Cliff Richard. It's a wonderful time of year. Being the spooky pasty queen that I am, don't love the sun that much. So this is wonderful. But also at this time of year, I don't know about you, but I always get a little bit nostalgic in other ways. Right, I start to reflect on the year gone by, of everything that's happened and where I've come, the progress I've made, where I was and how far I've come. And one of the things that I really like to check in on quite regularly is things that I used to find really hard that aren't so hard anymore. Specifically mindset things, right? I'm not talking about the amount of weight that I can bench press because, let's be honest, that's non-existent. Me and my little chicken arms. No, I look back on the things in my business that I used to see as almost unachievable challenges, right? Mountains that I would never be able to climb that now just feel like a little bit of a slope. One of those areas that I've come so far along with is a combination, I've talked about both of these things before, but a combination of performance anxiety, so freaking out whenever I have to do something, especially if it's something that's going to be critiqued or delivered to other people, so like a webinar or some design work, even when I sit down to do this podcast, is a combination of that and imposter syndrome, of thinking I haven't got a fucking clue what I'm talking about. Any minute now, someone's going to expose me for the fraud I am. Now, these are things that I've struggled with for a really long time. And like I say, I've come a long way with it, a long way with it. But I remember the absolute peak of this fear, right? When this was the worst for me and I just wanted to curl up in a ball like a little armadillo and just hide in my shell and not allow anyone to say a bad word about me ever. Right, this peaked when I first launched Strange, because that was the biggest, scariest thing I'd ever done. It was such an enormous leap into the unknown. And I felt so exposed. Felt like everyone was just going to tell me how shit I was. Everyone was going to see me for this big fraud that I was. See what I mean when I say I've come a long way? So when I launched Strange, I decided I was going to do the thing. I was going to do it. I was going to be brave little soldier. I set up my website, had my branding in place. I wrote a manifesto. You know, all of those things that you do so that you don't have to be in any way exposed to the real world. Please go back to the archives of this podcast and see the episode Don't Worry, Be Crappy for an insight into procrastinating planning, which was absolutely what I was doing at this point. But at some point, you know, you've got to put on your big girl pants and just put stuff out there, get the business off the ground, do the thing that scares you. And so I did. And I launched Strange a few years ago now. I started to get inquiries, exactly what I wanted, right? Oh no, I freaked out. freaked out massively when people actually started to say, oh, cool, yeah, I need some design doing, I need branding, I need to work with an agency, how can you help me? Suddenly I was an absolute quivering mess of a human. All of the things that I had asked for had suddenly landed in my inbox, and I was like, can't do it. Now, luckily for me, as I've mentioned before, I was working with a business coach at the time, who tended to make me realise how fucking dramatic I always make my fears. Like, it's not a case of, oh, this is a bit scary, I might need a little bit of help to get through it. It's like, no, I am literally going to die. I can feel my soul leaving my body because of that email that just landed in my inbox. Any given part of my physical form will catch fire if someone tells me I've done something wrong or if I make the smallest mistake. So the fear of the day for this one session was, I'm not smart enough, talented enough, knowledgeable enough to do the things that these potential clients, that these inquiries were asking me to do. Bear in mind, it wouldn't have just been me doing it. I was hiring other very, very qualified, talented people to help. I see that now. But at the time, this was the worst thing in the entire fucking world. Now, it would have fallen on flat ears if I had just been told in the moment when I'm freaking out about this in this session that those things weren't true, right? That my fears weren't true, that my mind was just being a dickhead, that it's just chemical reactions in my body. Nothing was in fact on fire. I was in a self-pity and fear spiral. And someone saying, no, that's not a thing. What are you talking about? Of course you're talented. It would have had the equivalent effect with someone saying, have you thought about just not fucking worrying about it? Useless. Not helpful. So what my coach said to me that day in that session instead, which has stuck with me this whole time, was, Alex, can you help these clients? Can you help them? What a simple concept that is, eh? Now, I tell you this story from my experience because this is something that everyone does. I see it so much. I see it play out in the conversations that I have, in the problem posts that people are putting in groups, in the questions that they put to their networks. The crippling fear that I see hold people back is that they don't consider themselves enough of an expert to charge for their knowledge, skills, or expertise. They don't think they know enough. They don't think they're enough of an expert, right? Like, they don't have enough certificates. They don't have enough degrees. They don't rank high enough in their industry to be charging for what's in their brain, for their experience. Now, I follow many business gurus, many coaches, many inspirational people who have built really successful businesses. And one of my favourite pieces of advice that I've heard in recent years is from business strategist Lisa Johnson. And what Lisa Johnson says is, an expert is someone who knows the most about a subject in the average room. I'm going to say that again louder for the people in the back. An expert is someone who knows the most about a subject in the average room. Not someone with the most certificates. Not someone who knows the most in a city, a town, a country, in an entire industry, in a room. Now, I was in a networking chat a few years ago, and there was a woman in this call who had been sober for about 15 years. She was talking about what that journey was like for her, how it played out, and how she had to learn so much along the way. Every single year that passed brought different challenges. And she was saying that when she went to meetings for addiction support, the new people who had just gotten sober weren't so interested in her help and her advice. Instead, they wanted to talk to the people who had only been sober a few weeks. Right? They wanted to hear from someone who was just a few steps ahead so they could follow safely and closely behind. Right? What a powerful thing to think. Say, for example, you'd thought for ages about starting online cooking classes, but you see these Michelin star chefs putting out online content and you think, well, I'm nowhere close to them. There are people out there who can't boil a fucking egg. They don't want to be learning from Michelin star chefs. They want someone that they can follow closely behind, someone to teach them the basics. These clients that I was helping with Strange, they were founders who were starting businesses in areas that they knew loads about. Branding and creative, not one of them. So of course I could help them. Don't get bogged down in the idea of being an expert before you can monetize your skills, your expertise, your talents. Instead, just think about, what do people come to you for advice on? Package that shit up. You can make some money from it. All right, you lot. I think the lunch break is coming to an end, so I'll leave it there. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll catch you here next time. If you love what you're hearing in this podcast, but you are still yet to start that rebel empire of your own, I've got something that might help. Head over to the show notes of this episode where you will find a free 7-step action plan to kickstarting your first side hustle. It's got pretty pictures, it's got activities. What more could you want, my loves? Get it downloaded, try it out, let me know how you get on.